Recently, I've been thinking about how much thought goes into making a manga. The right setting, the right characters, their designs, locations, motivations, power systems, ships, and the list goes on. Now, after doing some research on the matter, not only did I find out an answer to my original question, but I've also realized how more often than not, the final results that us manga enthusiasts get to enjoy are quite different from what the authors originally envisioned for their stories. So, as you might have guessed by now, in today's video I want to talk about how some of the biggest manga in the world evolved from their original concepts to the incredible stories that we all know and love today. But before we can continue, I'm going to politely ask you to leave a like and maybe think about subscribing to the channel. It helps me more than you think. So anyway, let's get started with the topic of this video, and since this is my channel, let's begin by talking about my favorite manga of all time, Berserk. With over 60 million copies sold worldwide, Berserk is one of those series that needs no introduction. Acclaimed by both critics and fans for its story and art, it's considered an example on how a well-written dark fantasy manga should be made. But did you know that a year before the world could be blessed by its existence, a prototype version of Berserk was published? Released by Hakusensha Gekkan Komikomi magazine in 1988, Berserk, who would later be renamed by fans as Prototype Berserk or Proto Berserk, is a 48-page one-shot submitted by Miura during his college years. The short story introduced many concepts and ideas that Miura would later use in the final version of his story, such as Guts and Pack design, the Apostles, and Guts' quest for revenge, though the latter was slightly changed in the version that we know today. We also see that the character named Frika would later serve as the base for Griffith's design. But going back to Guts' design, it's also interesting to note that Miura stated that he was influenced by Mad Max. He said, in quote, "In short, starting from a world with a dark hero who is burning for revenge prompts you to imagine a rabbit character. When guided by his anger, he will pour out this rage on overpowered enemies. We must insist on his fanaticism if you want to stay consistent." Other media that served as inspiration for Berserk include the 1982 film Conan the Barbarian and the Elric of Millenborn series, both known for their dark fantasy settings. But going back to its publication, the one-shot story placed it second at the 7th Komikomi Manga School Prize, paving the way for the release of the first volume of Berserk in the summer of 1989, allowing the world to experience one of the best stories of all time. As much as I'd love to spend the rest of this video praising Berserk, it's time to move on to the next entry on this list, one that might be familiar to some of you. A little indie manga series called Dragon Ball. Have you heard of it? I'm kidding, we all know about Dragon Ball. Hell, my grandma knows about Dragon Ball. But something that not everyone might know about Dragon Ball is the story behind its conception. A year before finishing his previous manga, Dr. Slump, inspired by his love for Hong Kong martial arts films and convinced by his then editor Kazuhiko Torishima, Akira Toriyama decided to create a new manga. But unlike Dr. Slump, which relied on Western influences for both its scenery and humor, Toriyama took inspiration from Chinese culture, more specifically the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West. For those unfamiliar, Journey to the West is a major tale in Asian literature, following a monk and his disciples on a quest for knowledge and adventure. One of these characters is the great monkey god Sun Wukong, who would become the main inspiration for the creation of Goku, but more on that later. All these new ideas led to the creation of two one-shot stories that can be considered precursors to the manga we now know as Dragon Ball, aka Dragon Boy and the Adventures of Tongpu. In Dragon Boy, we follow a boy named Tang Tong, who by order of his master has been sent on a quest to return the princess of the Flower Country to her homeland. However, the task turns out to be far more dangerous than Tang Tong thought, as he must fight demons and robots to complete his mission. Meanwhile, in the Adventures of Tongpu, the story is centered around a cyborg boy named Tongpu, who after escaping the explosion of his own ship, gets stuck on an alien planet. There, he meets a young girl named Plamo, who has been trapped on the planet for the past 2 years, and the two join forces to find a way back home. Both stories contained elements that would later become part of the Dragon Ball mythos. In Dragon Ball, for an example, we can already see the similarities between Tang Tong and Goku, both being young, socially isolated martial artists, joined by a young girl on their adventures. We also see the first iterations of both the Flying Nimbus and the Dragon Balls, though the latter had a different purpose in the one-shot compared to Toriyama's final product. And in the adventures of Tong Po, we see an early version of the capsule technology that would later become a staple in the Dragon Ball universe. But even with these two one-shots paving the way, the finish line was still far off for Toriyama. After the publication of these stories, and just a few months before the end of Dr. Slump, Toriyama submitted a first draft of his new manga to his editor, who originally rejected it, mostly due to the design of the main cast. Much like in Journey to the West, Toriyama originally wanted Goku to be a monkey, like Sun Wukong. However, Torishima felt readers of Shonen Jump, who at the time, like pretty much today, were mostly young kids, wouldn't connect with a main character that is a literal monkey. This made Toriyama go back to the drawing board, and in October of 1984, just a month before its scheduled release, Toriyama submitted the second draft of his new story, under the title Dragon Ball. In here we get a story that finally starts to resemble the manga that we know and love today. Not only in the design department, but most importantly, elements such as the Dragon Balls, which were used as simple fighting items in Dragon Boy, were updated to magical objects that could summon a dragon and grant a single wish, giving the characters a game-like quest to gather them. Although the concept was approved, this second draft was also rejected, mainly because of Goku's personality. Torishima believed that Goku lacked the personality needed to be a compelling lead character. This brought Toriyama back to the drawing board one last time to make the necessary changes, and on November 20th of 1984, Dragon Ball was finally introduced to the world. And well, what else can I say? Dragon Ball became the most popular manga series of all time, and by far the most influential shonen manga of the last 40 years. To this day, Dragon Ball is considered a major inspiration for mangakas like Eiichiro Oda, Tite Kubo, and Masashi Kishimoto, who went on create One Piece, Bleach, and the next manga we're gonna talk about on this list, Naruto. Naruto's conception began in 1995, after the release of the one-shot manga Karakuri. Unsatisfied with his subsequent draft for a follow-up, Masashi Kishimoto decided to work on another project that he would call Naruto. Originally, the story would have featured Naruto as a chef in a ramen shop, but fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you see it, this concept never took off. Quoting Kishimoto in an interview with Naruto Meigen Shu, "It was supposed to be a teenager named Naruto cooking ramen, but my editor at the time told me it will never work. I had to find something else, and this became a story about ninjas." So, in 1997, a one-shot of Naruto was created for Akamaru Jump, based on this new idea. Despite the positive feedback it received in a reader's poll though, Kishimoto was unhappy with the art and the story. This early version of Naruto differs in a few ways from the final product that we know today, like the fact that Naruto was supposed to be a demon fox who could turn into a human, and that he was the son of Kurama. Also, the ninja village that we now know as Konoha was supposed to be called Mount Oinari, and it had a more modern design compared to the final result. Even though this early version of the story was pretty different from the one the world would end up receiving a few years later, it still had the core elements that would make Naruto the series that we know today, such as Naruto being a pariah, his search for people that he could call friends, his love for ramen, and him turning himself into an adult woman to mess up with people. Now, I could keep trying to point out the main differences between the one-shot and the Naruto manga that the world is familiar with, but truth be told, I'm not the biggest Naruto fan out there, so I might not have noticed all the changes and Easter eggs like a real fan would have. And that's why I decided to ask for a little help from the biggest Naruto fan that I know. Take it away, consumer!
From the beginning of this one shot, we can already see some differences. Both start with Naruto pulling some sort of prank, although the nature of these two pranks greatly differs. In the manga, Naruto graffitis the face of the 4th Hokage. In the one shot, Naruto tricks a friend into a hole, proceeding to bathe him in a gold-coloured liquid. It is strongly implied this guy had it coming, but the nature of this prank is far more mean-spirited than the graffitiing of an inanimate object, and the end result is that it made me feel a little less bad for this incarnation of Naruto. Differences in characterization are pretty consistent throughout the one shot. In the one-shot, Naruto is the son of the demon fox that destroyed a village. In the serialized manga, he's an innocent child with a demon fox forced into him. These minor differences add up to what is a very different feeling manga. But in retrospect, these differences are pretty cool, because they highlight the areas that Kishimoto improved upon. It's also interesting to see that some character designs are rather different from their serialized counterpart. The third Hokage in particular had a glow up from his initial conception. Some things though are still the same as I remember. I'm talking about you, Ichiraku Ramen Guy. Stay awesome. The main goal of both though is quite similar. They both aim to establish Naruto's struggle due to his unique relationship with the demon fox, and by the end of the chapter present him with hope out of the situation in the form of someone who cares about him. In the serialization, this was Iruka Sensei, while in the one-shot it is a stranger who has lost the ability to trust other people. I really found Naruto's connection with this guy to be inspiring, and watching Naruto convince him to trust people again put a smile on my face. Naruto has been abusing top no jutsu since at least 1997, and we love him for it. In that sense, this one-shot is not that different from the serialization.
Thank you again, consumer. And speaking about serialization, a few years later, after a few more revisions and design changes, Naruto finally debuted in Shonen Jump, becoming one of the highest selling mangas of all time, alongside series of the caliber of Dragon Ball, One Piece, and personally one of my favorite shonens of all time, Bleach. When I think about Bleach, I think about three things in particular: Ichigo Kurosaki, cool swords, and people screaming from the bottom of their lungs. But that wasn't what Tite Kubo originally envisioned when he first started working on Bleach. The whole manga started from his desire to draw a Shinigami in a kimono, and that first Shinigami was Kuchiki Rukia. In the initial stages of development, Rukia was supposed to be the main character in the story, and she would have used a scythe, making her standing out from the other Shinigamis that in this first draft were supposed to use guns. The first title of the series was Snipe, as in sniper. However, after realizing the difficulties in mixing guns with Japanese folklore, Kubo decided to switch the guns idea with the inclusion of the Zanpakutos, and changing the name of the series to Black, due to the color of the Soul Reaper's clothes. But Kubo quickly thought that the title was a little bit too generic, so he later tried to name it White. But ultimately, he decided to go with the name Bleach, for its association with the color white, and the fact that it would be a good title for a story about soul reapers who cleanse and purify souls. Now, with these changes also came the idea of demoting Rukia from the main character position, though she would still be part of the main cast, becoming one of the most badass characters in the whole series. The role of main character would fall upon Ichigo Kurosaki, who would be introduced on January 1st of the year 2000 with the one-shot Bleach, in which we saw some of the elements that would make Bleach the manga that we know and love today, like the dynamic between Ichigo and Rukia, Shinigamis, Hollows, etc. Of course, the one-shot also diverged in a few points compared to its final product, like the fact that after losing her powers, Rukia shrank to the point where she could fit in Ichigo's mug, Orihime dying and becoming a spirit, and Hollows missing their iconic masks. Unfortunately though, the one-shot was rejected by Shonen Jump, almost disencouraging Kubo-sensei. But sometimes good things come out of the worst situations, because the legendary manga artist Akira Toriyama saw the story and wrote a letter of encouragement to Kubo. This of course gave Kubo more motivation to keep going, and just 1 year later, Bleach was finally accepted for publication, and it became one of the most iconic mangas that we know today. It's important to mention the enormous impact that Bleach had in the manga industry, being an inspiration for series such as Black Clover, Jujutsu Kaisen, and the next entry on this list, Demon Slayer. Gotoge's first steps towards Demon Slayer can be traced to 2013 with the publication of the one-shot story Kagarigari that Gotoge submitted for the Treasure Newcomer Award. Right from the beginning, we can quickly start to see the similarities with Gotoge's final product, with elements such as the Nichirin blades, talking crows, the same time settings, and characters that would straight up be a part of Demon Slayer, such as Tamayo, Yushiro, and Muzan. Now, the main differences between Kagarigari and Demon Slayer come in regard to their main characters, aside from the easy to spot on differences in appearances, such as the missing arm and literal sight. Nagare Agatsuma was the complete opposite of Kamado Tanjiro. Unfortunately, Kagarigari was not picked for serialization, and this led to a series of one-shots that would both help Gotoge improve his art style and writing abilities. These one-shot stories being Monjushiro Kyodai, Rokutsu-san, and Ainiwa no Zigzag, all ultimately failing to become serialized works, but coming up with details that would later be used in Demon Slayer. Tatsuhiko Katayama, Gotoge's first editor, suggested him to start a series with an easy-to-understand theme. This led him to decide to revisit Kagarigari because it had elements such as swords and demons which would be familiar to the Japanese audience. This brought us to the conception of Kisatsu no Nagare. Unfortunately, Gotoge's story still wasn't good enough for publication. The reason being its lack of comedy and its overall dark tone, specifically with the main character. And with this also being an issue with Kagarigari, Gotoge decided to go the completely different direction and create Kamado Tanjiro. In addition to a new, brighter main character, the title was also changed. Kisatsu, which can be translated to the word kill, was swapped in exchange for the word kimetsu. Although it is a made-up word, kimetsu is supposed to have the same meaning of the word perish. With a few more touches here and there, on February 15 of 2016, Demon Slayer was finally released by Shonen Jump, and by the time of its ending, the manga had sold approximately over 150 million copies worldwide. And since we're on the topic of big mangas ending, there's also another pretty big shonen that recently finished its run that I believe is worth talking about: My Hero Academia. Again, much like the previous stories that we touched upon, the concept of My Hero Academia was first introduced to the readers of Akamaru Jump in 2008 with the one-shot entitled My Hero, in which we follow Jack Midoriya, a salaryman who aspires to become a hero, like his childhood idol, Positive. Unfortunately, due to the fact that he's anemic, Jack can't fulfill his dream, at least not in the conventional way, but this of course does not stop Jack from pursuing his dream, and this leads him into very dangerous situations. My Hero had the core elements of what would later become Horikoshi's biggest success, but of course some elements ended up being changed, such as turning Jack Midoriya into Izuku Midoriya. Their personalities and overall look would remain pretty much the same, but instead of being a salaryman, Izuku would be a high school student, making him more relatable to the targeted audience. The sickness element of Jack's character would be given to All Might, and instead of villains, the main antagonists were monsters called Aberrants. But of course, some of the biggest differences between this one-shot and the final product are the introduction of quirks, which were used in favor of the items that the hero used in the one-shot, and Positive no longer being the main superhero supporting the main character, instead being replaced by All Might, who ended up being one of the best things that came out of My Hero Academia. Fortunately for Positive's alter ego Snipe, his character design would later be used as one of the teachers at UA. And although hero gadgets were replaced by quirks, they would later be introduced into the main story of My Hero Academia as a sort of boost for certain heroes and their abilities. But going back to the story of My Hero, I want to quickly touch upon the message and the ending behind both this one-shot and the final version of My Hero. Spoilers of course, for those of you who have not read the ending of My Hero. Towards the ending of the one-shot, Midoriya realizes that, unfortunately, his dream of becoming a hero is going to remain that, a dream. But Positive makes Midoriya understand that you don't need to fight crime and wear a costume to be a hero. You can be a hero by helping others and being there for them when they need you. This is what it truly means to be a hero. Now shifting to the end of My Hero, again, spoilers, that is kinda what happens with Midoriya after he loses One for All. He cannot fulfill his dream of becoming a hero, but he ends up becoming a teacher, guiding and helping the next generation of heroes. In his own way, Deku does become a hero for those around him, even without One for All. Well, and then he gets an armor from his friends and he goes back to being a superhero, but that's not the point. After the publication of the one-shot, Horikoshi defined My Hero as his foremost masterpiece, and if he ever got the chance to redraw it, he absolutely would. But even with all the changes and stuff that were added, the main message of the story still remained the same. Everyone can be a hero to someone. Now, you might have noticed the underlying theme that pretty much all these authors had to deal with, which is to never give up. Sure, they had their fair shares of hard times, but they always kept going, and this led them to be where they are now. If you can take anything from this video, is that every great journey has its ups and downs, but it's those who never refuse to quit that make it to the top. So who knows what you will be able to achieve if you don't ever give up. So keep pushing, keep grinding, keep persevering, I don't know what else to say. Hey everyone, hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and think about subscribing to the channel. We're trying to reach 1K this year, so please subscribe. Another big thanks to Consumer for being a part of this video. Please go check out his YouTube channel. He does amazing videos. Please go check him out. He's incredible. Also, let me know down in the comments, what are your thoughts on these mangas? Did you enjoy their final versions, or do you think that the original concepts were better? That's it for today's video. See you next time. Bye!